Hello and welcome to a review of Charlaine Harris's Grave Surprise. This is not my first reading of the book, it's a reread. It was part of a series that came out in the early 2000s and I read it in the library then. It's a good reread. If you can have a cozy mystery thriller with a bit of supernaturally and a lot of dead bodies, Charlaine Harris can do it for you. And she does it well in the Grave series. All four of these together, I believe they're the whole series. And having read them the first time in the library, I then wanted to reread them a few years later, so I borrowed them. And eventually I just ended up going to second-hand shops and buying the whole thing myself so I can reread them whenever I wanted. Grave Surprise is, I believe, it's the second one in the series, so that you can read them out of order without too much difficulty. I finally got my hands on it and I just couldn't resist rereading it. I now have the full quartet. And if I ever want to reread them, I can reread them in order, which I don't think I've ever done before. So that'll be exciting. Charlaine Harris. Some of us readers may remember this name, and some viewers may remember this name as well, because her most famous series is the Sookie Stackhouse series, which was picked up by a network or it was picked up by someone who turned it into a HBO series called True Blood, which was pretty famous at the time. Again, the series is kind of like cozy with supernaturally, and I've got the first 8 books of the series. She went a bit AWOL after number 8 and started writing really trashy, minimalistic and over expensive books. I think they ended up being 12 or 13. I know people who had the whole series and got so frustrated with her that they just got rid of them. I refuse to accept them. The later ones aren't good. However, the early ones are. Charlaine Harris writes not perhaps the greatest literature in the world, but her writing is easygoing, it's fun, it's, I suppose the word of the day is cozy. They're nice to read. In the Grave series, the theory is our main characters are Connolly Harper and her stepbrother Tolliver. So when Connolly was a teenager, I can't remember how old, maybe 12 or 15 or something like that. She was struck by lightning. Her family were living in a caravan, I think what you call a trailer in America, and there was a spark of lightning, went to the hair straightener that she was holding, and she ended up with some scars and some strange side effects. Apparently, according to Charlaine Harris's little comment at the beginning of this book is dedicated to a tiny minority of the American population, people who have survived a lightning strike, members of a small and exclusive club, and some of these survivors just talked to her. None of those survivors actually ended up with the talent of finding dead bodies, which is what Harper Connolly in these series can do. If she walks around and approaches a place where there is a dead body, she will get this buzzing sense until she locates the area, and when she gets close to it, she will often know things about it that can be useful in locating a murder or solving a murder, but definitely in locating the body. So if she's standing on top of the body, she typically knows the name and a few things about how they died. She makes her living as a finder using this extraordinary talent, and her brother Tolliver travels with her and manages the business. And manages her because it takes it out of her finding these dead bodies. Now, in Grave Surprise, which I've long wanted to reread, we start with an interesting concept. So we've got a university professor who has a subject where he teaches students to debunk supernatural, psychics, etc., who are defrauding the public. He's called in Harper and Tolliver to search a very old graveyard where the records have just recently been found saying who's buried where and what they died of. He thinks to use this to defraud her ability to locate dead bodies and say what they're found of. So the opening sequence is her in this little old picturesque graveyard walking around and totally failing to allow him to disprove her because she's actually accurately identifying the person buried there, even when there's no headstone, and accurately or more or less accurately identifying what they died of. More or less accurately, because it's an old graveyard and these records were recorded by police and they didn't know, by priests, not by police, and they didn't know about blood poisoning, for example, when this graveyard was active. Then she comes to this one grave, and within it she finds not only the original inhabitant, but a much fresher body, the body of a girl called Tabitha. Now, Harper and Tolliver had been hired sometime before by Tabitha's family in another city to locate their daughter's body when they lost all hope that she would be found alive. Having now found her, they are of course implicated. The police don't believe in her talent, etc., etc., etc. So they're hanging around, and they're around the Morgenstern family. Tabitha was a Tabitha Morgenstern, and a whole heap of stuff is happening. And we end up with a dramatic shooting as the murderer of Tabitha is inadvertently found by Tolliver and Connolly. These are fun books. I don't know if I've said this already, probably not. Charlaine Harris, she isn't the most amazing author in the world. She's not writing great literature, but she writes these fun little stories set within a very concise, I would imagine, world boundary that is the world boundary of the author and types of people which are probably the same. The fact that she dedicates Grave Surprise only to the American population who survived lightning strike, I think indicates her home-centric attitude, and that comes through in all her books. All the books of hers that I've read anyway. All 3 or 4 series. The Shakespeare series is another one of hers. Again, you've got this slightly offbeat characteristic, but it's also a bit mystery thrillery. I do recommend them as cozy, fun, non-demanding reads with good characters. One of the things I like about this one is Harper Connolly herself is a reader. She reads books, and somewhere page 200 and something, I can't remember which it is, she actually mentions that she's reading Marjorie Allingham's The Tiger and the Smoke, which I also possess and have read before, though it's obviously due a reread since it's come up. What else to say? The central concept behind the Grave Quartet is what makes it fun. And again, the characters aren't deep and meaningful. There's not a lot of angst there, but there's some good character building and there's some good storytelling. I do enjoy them. I'm very glad to have the whole quartet, and I will now be able to read them in order. Can't remember if I've said that already. If anything I've said sounds interesting, by all means try Charlaine Harris. I would recommend the Grave series or the Shakespeare series to start with, and then you might want to invest yourself in the Sookie Stackhouse series. I think the first one in that is Dead as a Doornail. Word of warning, if you are a completionist who has to read to completion an entire series once you start it, perhaps avoid the Sookie Stackhouse series. They definitely did go downhill eventually. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Read good books.